Yeah.
Okay, well, it is quarter past the hour, ladies and gentlemen, and so welcome to the IMDHA virtual chapter for December of 2017, the last of this year. We've got some exciting stuff going on. First of all, everybody knows already because we've been hanging out here saying hello to James Tripp, who's going to be our guest tonight. We're looking forward to talking to him in just a very little bit. And in the meanwhile, we do have a few things we need to tell you about. They are, first of all, that very soon, for those of you who've been around for more than a year, you know, every year before the IMDHA convention, we have weekly teleconferences where we talk to the folks that are presenting pre and post conference programs and things out there at the conference. That's going to be starting soon. I don't have an actual starting date yet, but it's going to be starting probably mid to late January. We're going to do it a little differently this year because some of those presentations were only a week or two before the conference, and it didn't give people time to make changes to their travel plans or things like that. So we're going to get them done a whole lot earlier. We're going to be done a month before the conference because each night we're going to do 2 of them instead of 1. So we'll have 2 45-minute presentations. The night is not for sure. It will either be Sunday or it will be Wednesday. We have yet to make that final decision, but it'll be announced on the virtual chapter on Facebook. If you're a member of that group, you'll see it there. And if not, just check back in with us and we'll tell you all about it when it's coming up. We also have a real exciting thing coming on, and it's so sad that we have James. It's great that we have James with us tonight. I was going to say, but what's so sad about it is that these calls go by very quickly, and beginning in January, because it has happened that way, we are expanding the format, and our calls are going to be 90 minutes instead of the hour that they have been. And actually, they've really only been 45 minutes. So beginning with the January meeting, we'll be on the same nights, the second Tuesday of the month, but we'll be logging in at 8:15 or so for an 8:30 start, and we'll be done at 10 o'clock. That's all Eastern time, so of course you need to adjust it to your own time zone. But basically the same time we're here now, except it'll go an hour later. And that'll give us time to do something a little more worthwhile. So we're looking forward to that. And besides, it also means that we might be able to add some special features and who knows, party games or something exciting. Because Karen and I, once we put our mind to it, you don't know what could happen. So there's going to be that. Also, January 4th is World Hypnotism Day. And we are going to sponsor, or the virtual chapter, how do I say it, is going to celebrate World Hypnotism Day online. We'll be logging on at 6 o'clock. I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. At 5 o'clock, rather, East Coast time until 11 o'clock East Coast time. So that'll be, again, adjusted to your time zones. And basically, we're just going to be hanging out, celebrating, talking about how lovely hypnosis is. And we'll have at least one different guest every half hour stopping in to say hello and share some stories and experiences. It's going to be lovely. So, yeah. And the way that I think about it, I told Karen, I said, we want to keep it conversational. We want to keep it casual. I think though that before it begins, we should have a banquet. So all put your catering orders in advance, and make those arrangements. You can just have it delivered to you locally, and there will be refreshments and beverages served, throughout the course of the evening as well. Anything you want, just to keep it stocked up at your house and make sure you've got your favorites on hand. It'll be delightful. So that's just going to be a lovely evening, and Karen and I are going to be like the guys up in the booth, watching the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, just commenting every half hour as another guest comes through. So it's going to be a great time. So the last thing that I have to tell you is logistics. This program is being recorded, and so the recording will be available hopefully by noon tomorrow. I can't always promise that. It gets posted on the IMDHA forum for those of you who are members of the organization. And if you're not members of the organization, or if you just don't want to go there to get it, the Facebook group, the virtual chapter Facebook group, will also have a link to the video from tonight. So that if you really loved what James said, but because it was so late at night for you, that you need to hear it again tomorrow. So you might want to listen again tomorrow, James, yourself. Then
I do, yes.
Yeah, so then you can play it again, and you can play it for your friends and amaze your relatives and neighbors, and just really celebrate the holiday with it. So it's recorded, and for those of you who are members of my Act and IMDHA, you can get CEUs for spending an hour with us tonight, and all you have to do is to log on to the website for the organization that you are a member of, and when you log on with your member's ID, it'll put up a page where you can say, I attended the virtual chapter, and I deserve to get that hour back. And they will give you credit for having spent time with us. So that's just about all that I got. Anything from Chicago, the Midwestern Division, Karen?
Getting excited about the World Hypnotism Day, and getting excited about the prospect of bringing core transformations in a dual format between Orlando and Chicago in February too. So those are the things we're working on here in Chicago very diligently.
Those are really exciting things.
They are.
Yeah.
And stay till the end of the program tonight to find out who our guest will be this time next month.
Oh yeah, because right now it's a secret, but you'll know in a moment.
That's right.
So by the way, let me just tell you, James Tripp is, I have to do this now. I am going to mute everybody, and then I am going to open up the microphones for Karen and for myself and for James. So bear with me while I do that. We'll give you a chance to, you can open up your own microphone later on during the question and answer session. But in the meantime, it'll just help us keep the noise down. So
and you can also chat. If you have a question, you can go to the chat room and type it in. We'll keep an eye on that as well.
Okay, so Karen, you are unmuted, and James. Oops, what's happened? James, say hello to me.
Hello, Michael.
Good, lovely. All right, I'm so glad to know that you are here. And Karen,
I am here.
Karen?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. Testing. Is this thing on?
I think it's working.
All right. Well, so let me tell you, we have got this guy James Tripp here, and the thing with James is that I remember years ago seeing him post something on the internet. I believe I mentioned to you. I believe it was the beginning of Hypnosis Without Trance.
Yeah, it's pretty early on. Yeah.
And I was really impressed. I was so impressed that not only did I dash him off a note, which I really don't do. I also recall that the very first line of that note, which is so out of character for me, although there is a voice in my head that maybe does this from time to time, I think that it started out James, because I was just really delighted with what I saw. And as I mentioned earlier in the recorded session of this, I referred to him as being the real deal. I was very happy to see the work that he was doing. And gosh, this has continued to evolve. So here's my first question, and where I'd like to kick this off from James. But well, let me give you an official introduction. What can I say about you? Because
you froze.
I'm sorry, frozen.
Yeah, you froze for a moment there, but you're back. You're back.
I'm so glad to know that. So James Tripp is an internationally recognized and respected personal adaptedness coach. I love how carefully chosen these words are, by the way. Developmental hypnotist and teacher of self-mastery, hypnosis, and influential communication. And he comes from a diverse background, including philosophy, music, martial arts, movement, culture, and NLP. James is also the developer of the critically acclaimed Hypnosis Without Trance approach to hypnosis. And that's where I want to start, James. So
okay.
Welcome. We're so glad to have you here. And
thank you for having me here, Michael.
Yeah, you bet. So here's what I want to know. What is this thing? And by the way, I already have some answers to the questions, so I'm asking this rhetorically. But what is this thing called Hypnosis Without Trance?
So really, I mean, when I kind of got into hypnosis, I got into hypnosis through getting into more NLP stuff and Milton model stuff. And this is my interest initially was in conversational hypnosis. That was the big lure for me. But when I started seeing clients initially, I couldn't get any business as an NLP coach. That's the truth of it. Nobody wanted to hire an NLP coach. So somebody said to me, well, you know, you're trained by Society of NLP, Richard Bandler. Because there's a hypnosis component in that, you can give your certificates to the General Hypnotherapy Standards Council here in the UK, and they will issue you with a general qualification in hypnotherapy practice. So that was great, except that I felt that I didn't really know enough about hypnosis. I was aware that there were people out there doing all sorts of interesting things with hypnotic phenomena, and I wasn't really doing that. I was just kind of, you know, relaxing people and riffing around these sort of language patterns and things, and it was all very floaty and non-specific. So I felt that I ought to go and learn something about hypnosis from some different perspectives. And that's what I did. But the thing is, I went out and started doing street hypnosis with people. This was really just for myself. I had no real desire to do it. I just wanted to have an opportunity to practice certain things I didn't want to start doing with my clients straight off the bat. I wanted to go out there in the world. And all the street hypnotists were sort of classic old school direct hypnotists, yanking people's arms and shouting sleep. And the thing that quickly became apparent was that I could, because I always had this interest in the conversational side of things, I could kind of sit down with somebody in a quiet corner, not draw too much attention to myself, and get all the stuff that the people who were yanking arms and shouting sleep could get without yanking arms and without shouting sleep and without doing any kind of apparent trance induction whatsoever. Now, I'm not saying it's conversational, it's still formal process, but all the street hypnosis people were going, wow, that's incredible. How can you possibly do that without a trance induction? So the other thing is when I did do trancey stuff with people in the street hypnosis context, sometimes people would go very, very deep in trance and they get their eyes fluttering and various other trance analogs, but no phenomena happening. I'd go for something and nothing would happen. No hand would lift. And it seemed to be there was no correlation between this classic trance state and the phenomena. People could do the phenomena, be eyes open, all of this. So somebody on the street hypnosis scene said, you should really do something with this. There's a real buzz about it. So I did. But I actually don't think it's anything that original at all. In going back to James Braid, you know, if I'd have actually read James Braid's later works at the time, I probably never would have blogged anything about Hypnosis Without Trance. I never would have thought there was anything particularly exciting about it. So I'm very thankful that I didn't read James Braid's work back then. But that's about it, really. It's just the idea that there isn't really a special state called trance that renders people uniquely open to suggestion. People respond to suggestion anyway. And if you go straight for the phenomena that you want and you really think about your language and using your language to really shape the experience directly, it works better. And that's it. Which I just want to say, it doesn't mean that when I'm working with clients, I don't bring them into perhaps what Stephen Gilligan would call a generative trance, more of a sort of Ericksonian therapeutic trance. I think that's of great utility therapeutically, but not really necessary for increasing response to suggestion, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. You know, I have, it's funny, I can't tell you how many of my students have learned from you how to do magnetic hands or the card stick or the hand stick,
right,
or you know, or something like that, because you did so many videos of that kind of street hypnosis phenomena back when you were kind of in these earlier stages of the work that you've done, and so yeah, we appreciate all that, and yet here's the thing that I'm intrigued by, and I think has gotten you so much attention, is that while what you're saying is music to my ears, being the Ericksonian that I am anyway, and I'm not much for shouting sleep at people and you know, and doing all this anyway. What I know is that the work that you're doing has evolved, that you have evolved, and I think there's been so much growth in you over the course of the last 7 or 8 years. So there's a time when you put out this product called Hypnosis Without Trance that some people might have had some exposure to. And through the years, though, other things have drifted into it. So I guess I'm kind of interested in what you discovered on the route, and what are the things that are particularly important to you in hypnosis, you know, now as your own work grows and develops.
Okay. In a sense, things have evolved and changed for me, but recently I had cause to listen to that old program that I originally put out. And I sort of thought, well, you know, I pretty much agree with everything that I've said here. I don't disagree with myself, but I suppose I've just kind of refined it more. A lot of what I did back then seems redundant now. I'm a lot more direct, not in the classic sense of as in, you know, not authoritarian direct, but I'm a lot more direct in going for what I want to go for. I think I'm a lot better at reading people, picking up cues, seeing where people are along for the ride. I'm bolder as a hypnotist than I used to be. I used to be I had lots of bits and pieces in to make sure couldn't possibly fail. But I think I've done a lot of self-development stuff, and now I'm not actually that fussed about whether I fail or not. It's no big deal. I think what's really changed is I love looking at how we use language and communication to shape experience. So I keep exploring that and going deeper into that, and refining little bits and pieces. So I've got better as a hypnotist in that respect. I actually have come to start using the term trance a lot more than I did, because I was like very much without trance. But now I tend to see things. I see everything in terms of trance. I see people in one trance or another all the damn time. They're you know, and that's the thing. If somebody says, "Oh, I don't think I can be hypnotized," I find it funny, because of course they're totally hypnotized by the idea they cannot be hypnotized.
And by the way, if you just pause right now, here we are sitting in front of screens. Everybody's focused on a screen and listening to James Tripp talk about trance. What do you think? Right?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the big thing for me these days. I sit down with a client or I sit down with anyone, and the sort of the question in the back of my mind is, what's the trance they're in at the moment, and where are we going next? And it's just really that simple. And that's true for my change work clients. They show up in a particular trance. It's not necessarily the problem trance. It's a trance about the problem trance, or it's, you know, and I'm never thinking I'm talking to this. I do respect that people are human beings, but I'm always aware that I'm never speaking to the human being. I'm speaking to one of their trances in any given moment. There could be another one pop up that's got a different perspective, or, you know, so I really do. I've kind of got back into the idea of trance, but in a different way, not as this special state, but as I see trance as any kind of state from which automatic behaviors emerge.
Nice.
And so far as I'm concerned, these words coming out of my mouth, I'm not stopping and thinking about these before they come out my mouth. They're just coming out my mouth. It's automatic.
Unlike the biography that you wrote. Sorry,
unlike the biography, yes. But even then, I was in the trance of crafting the biography.
Sure.
You know, so, and there's a lot of repertoire pieces that I would have done in terms of my thinking processes and all of that kind of thing. So there's one of the terms I use a lot, trance repertoires. I think that each one of us, we live our lives through a set of, through these trance repertoires. It's our shtick. It's our, you know, like a stand-up comedian has their repertoire. We have our repertoire of trances for different contexts in life. And this is what we show up and engage with the world through.
Nice.
So in change work, I'm often helping people to either transcend a particular trance by expanding out beyond it, or bringing something new into it, or just helping them transform that from the inside out, usually by kind of bringing things in. Mm-hmm. And I tend to think of trance, I'll just say this right now, one of the big things for me is I hardly ever use the whole depth metaphor. I'm much more interested in breadth, the sort of bandwidth, the width of the trance, because for me, a lot of the problem trances people have. They're very narrow. It's like the James Braid monoideism idea. They get wrapped around this tight set of ideas, and everything else about who they are just goes away. It's gone. So for me, when I'm doing change work with people, I often want to get what, say, Stephen Gilligan would call a generative trance or a therapeutic trance. I think of it as a broad bandwidth trance, just really opening out. And because I'm thinking about it like this, my language, I'm very interested in the use of language and communication to shape experience. I want to shape expansiveness rather than depth more. So that's where I tend to go in terms of change work kind of stuff.
Nice. So, Karen, by the way, you're being awfully quiet, so I want to make sure I leave you room to pop in here if you've got.
I will jump in. Yeah, I will jump in. I'm just listening avidly and loving what I'm hearing. It's right up my alley, as you know, Michael. Everything being hypnosis, and it's always in a trance.
It's always in a trance.
It's a lot, is it not, James? Like spell check on your phone. It's always running in the background.
Yes.
And always miscommunicating.
Yeah.
It's the spell check trance, and it's there, and it pops up in different programs. If you're in Word, if you're in the Word trance, spell check is likely to pop up over there too. So the trances can coexist or pop over into each other.
Yeah. I think I've reconnected with the term trance because it's more evocative. It's more poetic. And for a long time, I was using the term hypnotic loop, and I still do because I have a little model, a little diagram of this hypnotic loop. But hypnotic loop doesn't evoke. And I think one of the things that's true for me as a hypnotist is I see it as about evocation more than about induction. So I'm always interested in words that evoke things. So this is why I like the word trance now. I never really refer to the unconscious mind much with clients. I always refer to that deep intelligence within you because it's more evocative. It's more, I can kind of riff around it and get them into the sense and the feel of it, whereas unconscious mind has got a completely different feel to it, which is, it's not bad or good. It's just that's the thing that I like to shape with clients.
So I'm curious, James, when you're working with clients, are they expecting hypnosis? Are they expecting coaching? Or do they have an expectation?
Well, that kind of depends on the client. Because a lot of the work that I do at the moment is via a charity here in the UK called Rock to Recovery. It works with Rock to Recovery work with military veterans who are transitioning out of the military into civilian life or have transitioned and face many challenges in doing so. And the vast majority have got either a post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis or are manifesting a lot of the symptoms. Many of them have also, by the time they come to see us, they've had EMDR and they've had CBT. And the reason they've come to see us is because that hasn't worked for them. So I'm not introduced to them as a hypnotist. I'm introduced to them as a coach, which doesn't mean that I'm not doing all this, but that's the frame. And sometimes I like to bring the frame of hypnosis in with them. And I don't turn to them and say, you do know I'm a hypnotist, don't you? That doesn't, I say, I've trained with a lot of people and some of my mentors are actually hypnotists. So it's like I sort of dissociate from being a hypnotist, but still own having all of the skills of it if I want to bring that frame in without sort of freaking them out too directly. So there's that. But then I get people coming through the web and YouTube and this kind of thing. And they already know of me as a hypnotist. And that actually is not always a good thing. Because often those clients, if they've come in, especially through the hypnosis world, have often got a particularly rigid idea of what hypnosis is and expectations about what I should be doing and all of that. And then I have to kind of blow all of that out. So yeah, it's a frame that I like to play sometimes because it affords me it enables me to do certain things which I can't really do outside of that frame. I mean, most of the stuff I do, I can do outside the frame. I was working with a guy yesterday, and I just had him drop into peripheral vision, drop his tongue, notice his breathing, focus on his breathing, and open up a space. Well, I had him have the thoughts of a traumatic memory drift through the space whilst keeping the space open so that he wouldn't collapse down. This is a guy who's very reactive to these things. So to keep him kind of out of abreaction, keep him in being with the traumatic material without collapsing into it and being able to kind of stabilize himself. And I was doing it, and he had his eyes open staring at this point on the wall. And I was just thinking, my God, how hypnotic is this? It's just dripping. But of course, that wasn't the frame.
Right.
So that kind of stuff I can do outside of that frame. I can just say, I can talk about physiology, I can talk about neurology, I can talk about neurobiology, I can put it in all of these frames. But then sometimes, just sometimes, I want to crank up some finger signals because it seems like the right thing to do. And that's a trickier thing to put. It just is easier to bring the hypnosis frame in for doing stuff like that for me. So that's when I'll bring it in with the military veterans. Most of the time I'll keep it out unless I want to do that kind of thing.
Nice. Nice.
And that was going to be my follow-up question, was if you're doing this conversational trance work and someone comes to see you as a hypnotist, do you follow up with a more formal, what they might expect a hypnotic to be, just so their conscious mind can walk out going, yeah, I got the hypnosis?
Right, absolutely. I mean, a huge influence on me is David Grove, the New Zealand hypnotist, David Grove, who nobody knows was a hypnotist these days. So that kind of work is quite interactive. And the way David did that was extraordinarily trancy. Very interactive, but extraordinarily trancy. Most of the clean language coaches now do it in a very kind of uptime, coachy kind of way. But David was dripping with this sort of hypnotic vibe when he did it. So I tend to do a lot of that kind of thing. But what will generally happen is it just naturally segues. The more I gather about their stuff, once we've done the processing, I just kind of segue into this closing trance where they've got their eyes shut anyway, because often if I'm doing David Grove's Quadrant 2 stuff, I want people accessing embodied metaphors. I want them to get into the feeling first. So I have them close their eyes right up front rather than spatially organizing around them. And it will kind of just segue in. If I was doing it with eyes open, I'm just gonna say, and you can close your eyes, and I'll just riff in to it. And one of the gorgeous things about the sort of clean language approach is throughout the session, so much stuff has come out from the client. So many of their sort of what I call their neuro handles, the words that are connected to the really juicy stuff for them, that it becomes so easy to do tailor-made trance work at the end, plugging all of their material into it. So I tend to finish up like that, and then it will get very trancey in a traditional sense, and then I'll sort of bring them back around at the end, and you will know when the time is right for you to just open your eyes. And I always do a cheesy bit about noticing a different quality of light in the room. I've been doing that for years, and people go, oh yeah, something's changed because there's a different quality of light in the room. So I do finish up with something overtly hypnotic. And I often do when I'm not using the hypnosis frame as well. I'll do the same thing because I think it's good for people to have a little bit of downtime and just go into that space where things can consolidate at the end of the session. So, yeah.
Of course, it goes without saying, but for people who aren't really familiar with the way that clean language works, in my experience, it's a piece of what you said earlier when you were talking about evocation rather than induction. That it invites the client to offer and to explore their own metaphors, and to create their own trances, essentially with you as a facilitator of that process, and then and then you can turn it into something. But it really is the thing that's so sacred to me about it, at least, is that I've got this evolutionary hypnosis notion of emergence being what it's all about in the first place. So any way that I can get my client to start to to build the trance themselves, and then start to interact with that. That's just gold to me.
Mm.
And it sounds like this is an area where we have some certainly some common thinking, and certainly a place where I've been deeply influenced by Steve Gilligan. And I know you've certainly got some stuff from Steve.
For sure. I mean, Steve, actually, I've spent a grand total of 6 days with Stephen Gilligan, but that was kind of a game changer. Those 6 days.
Yeah.
So I still reap huge dividends all the time from the stuff that I learned from Stephen Gilligan.
Yeah.
The process I was describing yesterday, there's a huge Gilligan influence in that. Just keeping that field open and allowing things. He's got that idea. I think it's like it's in his book, The Courage to Love, which is a brilliant book. I think.
Yes.
He talks about something like all human experience flows through us until it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of collapse and neuromuscularly lock around it. And that, for me, that idea is golden in working with the veterans, because you see that neuromuscular lock. You see them go, you see the breathing, catch, and just being able to facilitate somebody staying open and allowing the experience. And once you get the idea of the experience moving through, that can become the foundation of that particular piece of trance work, of facilitating the experience moving through. So, huge amount of influence from Stephen Gilligan, just from those 6 days, and all of the books I read, obviously, as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, fantastic work.
If I might add, just anecdotally, Stephen really wrote a lot of my hypnosis curriculum without my permission.
Right.
Because I had an 8-day hypnosis training to teach, and I had done a number of programs with Stephen in the past as a participant, right?
Mm.
So I had this training to teach in San Jose, and they called Stephen. They said, I wonder if Stephen could come and do a part of this certification program that you're doing, because he doesn't offer certifications on his own.
Mm.
And so they called him, and the only day that he was available was to do the very beginning of my program. So I'm a young trainer at this point, and the guy who is starting out on day one with what is hypnosis. But instead, we started out on day 1 and 2 with Stephen Gilligan, and he did everything that he loves doing. And whenever people asked him a question that wasn't a part of his intended curriculum, he said, "Well, I'm certain that that's something that Michael will come around to in the next." So it was very good training for me.
I guess you're feverishly taking notes of everything that you would be having to cover.
Yeah, and saying those words that I couldn't say out loud. So I'm just looking at the clock and noticing, if you're ready, I think it's time for us to invite our studio audience to chime in if they've got some questions for you.
Yeah, there are a couple of questions here that Catherine has a question that she'll have to define the terms for me, I'm thinking, but she has a good question about do you use abruption and bridging? If you can open Catherine, I'll bet she can explain that a lot better than I can.
Mic is open. She can talk now.
Yeah. Hi, I just wanted to know that when you do your conversational hypnosis, do you do bridging over so when you're working with the PTSS, are you bridging over some of the trauma when they can't relate to it and recreating an experience? So you're basically coming over the trauma from the past, which is the bridging. And the abruption is saying a statement that is so out of the context of what you're doing, it basically puts them into trance or refocuses from ruminating on something. Does that explain it?
Possibly. I don't know, because I don't know those terms, and that doesn't sound, there may be certain things that I do that would overlap with that.
Right.
Regarding the post-traumatic stress disorder versus post-traumatic stress syndrome, I know there are some people advocating for post-traumatic stress injury as well.
Well, it's actually PTSS now. That's the official title of it now. It's not
right.
PTSD.
Right. In the circles that I move in, it still tends to get referred to as PTSD.
Well, it all does.
Yeah. And the thing I often offer to the veterans is that I don't see it as post-traumatic stress disorder or even a post-traumatic stress injury or a syndrome. I see it simply as a learning.
I agree.
Post-traumatic stress learning.
But how then, sorry.
Yeah. So I can say something about the kinds of things that I do with that, but I can't say whether I use abruption or bridging because they're not terms that I'm familiar with. So there's a lot of variety in that it's going to depend on the client. One of the interesting things is almost all of, well, I say almost because I don't like to speak in absolutes. All of the clients who have post-traumatic stress symptoms are all highly hypnotizable.
I agree.
There is an interesting correlation with that, and that's part of the problem. Is they flare up into things. So I use a lot of David Grove's Quadrant 2 stuff, which is working with embodied metaphors. I will sometimes do simpler things. I do bits and pieces sometimes from New Code NLP I will use.
Right.
What I want to make sure I do before I do anything is I want to make sure that they can be stabilized, that they've got like a good stability. They're not just going to collapse into ab reaction, because I do not think that that's useful. A lot of the veterans that I've seen have had bad experiences with EMDR because they've been through protocols where they've been dumped in for 2-minute chunks of absorption, white knuckling it through the experience. So depending on their kind of reactivity, I was working with a guy yesterday who had a lot of, he would just go straight away. So I got, and he could like basically hallucinate like crazy anyway. So I got him to put all his stuff right over the other side of the room and actually face away, ground himself, and then just take little glances back at it whilst remaining grounded and connected. So I don't believe that people have to dive straight in and go white knuckle it through this stuff. But at some point they need to bring a different kind of experience to it. There's a being with it. I'm a great believer in what you cannot be with will not let you be. So there's the facilitation of the process of them being able to get closer and closer to that whilst remaining grounded, whilst bringing resources to it as well. So depending on the client, it depends on how I'm going to work. But I do use a lot of David Grove Quadrant 2. There's a lot of stuff from New Code NLP in the mix. Sometimes I just rapidly do some things like some submodality stuff, often based on Richard Bandler's idea of using the picture frame. If they're quite stable and they start to see it, say, if you just see a picture frame around that, what kind of picture frame would that be? A black one with, and just, there's a number of desensitization processes. I also will do some stuff I learned from Lisa Schwartz, who's currently a big influence on me. I don't know if you know Lisa Schwartz's work. Comprehensive resource model. She does a lot of interesting stuff facilitating the neurobiology of attachment in complex post-traumatic stress. So I found that to be extremely useful as well. Because the thing about the military veterans, just to say, is people may think, oh, well, they've had issues, things occur in active service. And yes, they have, but they've got histories they brought into the military as well.
Exactly.
So, that's always relevant.
I agree.
I don't know if that's a very quick download with regard to that stuff, but I hope that's useful.
We do have more questions, so I don't mean to cut that short. But David also had a question. David Ruby. There's David.
Your microphone is open.
Yes, hello, James. I actually had two questions if we had time, but I was curious how you use clean language, either like in uptime trance or like an actual, formal trance. And what role do you think formal trance has with your model?
For me, formal trance is a different state. And I think if anything, it's a state which encourages more of a parasympathetic ascendancy rather than a sort of sympathetic arousal. So I think if that was all it was, then it would be of immense value. So really, I'm more interested in absorption and connection than I am necessarily in trance. One of the fantastic things about, say, David Grove's Quadrant 2 work, he'll go feeling to metaphor on the problem side. Now, I think that David Grove was doing something very clever with clean language that people miss. He's actually, by turning something into a metaphor form, it takes the dynamism out of it and keeps it still, but also creates a dissociation at the same time. So things can then evolve through stepwise. So, you know, if you've got somebody connecting to a body sensation and you say, and whereabouts is that? It's in my chest. And when it's in your chest, whereabouts in your chest? In the center. And it's in the center of your chest. And does it have a size or a shape? Yeah, it's tight and it's round. And it's tight and it's round. And it's tight and it's round like what? It's tight and it's round like a hard black ball or something like that. And then they're into metaphor. But this was a dynamic state before, which could flare up. But now it's actually been stabilized somewhat. And there's then you can facilitate the bringing of consciousness to it. I see David Grove's Quadrant 2 stuff as being essentially parts work. And you end up with a part, you know, and it's a round black ball. And what would you like to have happen? I would like it to be gone. And what would a ball that is round and black want when you would want it to be gone? It wants to expand. So you start getting the kind of teleology of the parts and being able to work with it. But because you've sort of got them in this metaphor form, they're not running out of control. They're stabilized and they're also dissociated as well. I think if you look at David Grove's language on that, what kind of X is that X? He's using the that to dissociate. If I'm using clean language to elicit resources, I don't use the that, I use the this. If somebody's saying I'm freedom, I'm going to say, what kind of freedom is this freedom? Because we're on the resource side. I want them associated. But if we're on the problem side, that's when I use the classic that. Most people that use clean language just stick with the that because they model David Grove. David Grove was often working on the problem side. I think he was deliberately dissociating, and that's been missed. But I've got a whole bunch of stuff coming out soon that I recorded in Brazil on using clean language in hypnosis. It will arrive at some point.
Thanks.
So in fact, James, why don't we go there, because we are running towards the end of our time. What do you got going on? You got some you have some new programs or some things coming up that people should know about, or?
Yeah, I've got this thing I recorded in Brazil. I still haven't seen the thing. It's being edited. It's all being done for me. I did a deal with Alberto in Brazil. He's releasing it in Portugal. I get to do the rest of the world. So I've got that going on. One of the things I'm actually doing is I'm going to rebuild Hypnosis Without Trance. I'm going to update it. I'm going to redo it, re-record the materials. I wanted to get focus back on what it was originally about. That's a huge thing. And aside from that, one of the big things I'm doing at the moment, we've just run the pilot of, is the Tripp MacArthur Changework Skills Development Program with my associate, Andy MacArthur, here in Edinburgh. So we've just run that, which is a first 7-day training, and we're rather pleased with how it went, I might say. So I'm going to be doing a lot more training of change work stuff and keeping the phenomena stuff sidelined.
I also see that at HypnoThoughts Live in Las Vegas this year, you are doing a Hypnosis Skills Boot Camp.
Yes, I'm doing a Hypnosis Skills Boot Camp. And with Adrian Madrill, Adrian suggested this is a fun thing. We're going to do a 4-hour class on hypnotricks and mentalism as well. It's a complete off-the-wall side thing. So
lovely, that'll be great. So how can people get in contact with you?
Okay, so people can get in contact with me by Facebook or by YouTube or Instagram. You can find me all over the place. My website is, I've got 2 websites. www.hypnosiswithouttrance.com is my hypnosis website. jamestripp.co.uk is my changework website. Great. Which is a pile of junk, that website is. I get clients in spite of that, not because of it.
All right. So listen, I want to keep you up just one more minute. It is the witching hour. I understand it's 2:00 where you are. So let me quick make our last announcements. But the reason we want to keep you here is that, well, we've got just a special little thrill for you at the end. So I just want to remind everybody, there will be a recording of this program available tomorrow, once again on the Virtual Chapter Facebook group or in the IACT IMDHA forum if you're a member of that group. Also, if you're a member of IACT or IMDHA, do be sure and get out there and claim your CEUs. And what do we got going on next month, Karen?
So next month, remember that it's a new time, same night, new time. We log on at 8:15, or if you're in Chicago or in the Midwest, like Sylvia and I and David, that'll be 7:15 for us. And it will go all the way till
10 o'clock. We actually started at 8:30.
Yes, we started at 8:30. That's right.
Log in 8:15 for an 8:30 start, and we'll be done at 10 o'clock.
And next month, we're going to start the year off with a dead man. Well, now he's alive again now, but Paul Arand was struck by lightning and died and came back to life. And he remembers that near-death experience. And so he became a hypnotist, and he works primarily with near-death experiences and life between lives and past life regressions. And Paul's going to tell us about some of those miraculous experiences he had and some of the things he does, and take us through some even case histories. He's been in couple of movies. He just recently did a documentary where he's working with past life experiences, so he's got a lot to share with us. Paul's a great guy. I think you'll have a fun time next month. Don't miss it.
Great. And remember, January 4th is going to be World Hypnotism Day, so so log on for that. Watch the virtual chapter for the specific login information. It's going to be the same phone number that we use for this, so or the same login number, so you'll be able to get there easily. And I think it's time for us to go. We have kept you long enough, James Tripp. So here's what I'm going to do, and this is what the special little thing is. What we like to do that is usually contraindicated during the rest of the program is to unmute everybody's microphones, just so that we all can have a chance in the great cacophony. You'll hear the Om somewhere behind it all, wishing you a happy, and thank you for being with us. And telling you good night. So good night, James.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oops, hold on. Are your mics open?
James, great job.
Yep.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks so much. I'm really enjoying the website.
Good night.
Being here.
Brilliant.
Good
Thank
night.
you, James.
Thanks for coming.
Good night.
Good night,
Take care.
everyone. Good night,
Good night.
James. Thanks for staying up.
Linda, take care.
Good night, Michael. Good night, Karen.
Good night, everyone, and Merry Christmas.
Is anyone gonna say good night back?
Good night, John.
Good night. I said good night, Linda.
Good night, John boy.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Okay.
Bye,
great.
everyone.